These are the top business stories live from the Sky Newsroom. The UK looks set to miss the deadline to agree a US trade deal on steel and aluminium as Donald Trump has threatened more tariffs on America's trading partners. ISA providers warn the Chancellor against capping the cash allowance. We'll be hearing from the Yorkshire Building Society. Plus, the city in the sun. How much does the good weather actually boost the bottom line? We'll be live in a rooftop bar. Yeah, very good morning. Welcome to Business Live on this Tuesday with me, Darren McCaffrey. Well, Donald Trump has threatened key trading partners yesterday with higher tariff rates, even as he delayed the increased duties until the 1st of August. The US president has threatened to impose 25% levies on goods from Japan, South Korea, South Africa, Indonesia, Thailand and Cambodia, but did suggest, as always, that he is still open to negotiations. So I'd say we'll speak to Ali Renison, who is director at NEC Newgate and a former policy advisor to the Secretary of State for Business. Ali, very good morning to you. And here we are yet again.
Indeed. Well, the question is whether is this really another case of what they call taco trades on the market, where A, sort of the president doesn't go through with his threats or at least delays them, and B, the market kind of shrugs off a lot of these threats. So we are here again. I think this is sort of an effect and example of the president saying, no, this time we really, really mean it, even if it takes another 3 weeks to get there. I'd be a little bit cautious, though, if I was investors betting that either deals are going to be made in 3 weeks or all the other tariff hikes aren't going to happen.
Well, isn't the biggest question, are these actually deals? I mean, they are deals in the sense of when you look at the UK, China, Vietnam, the kind of frameworks of deals, aren't they? Rather than what we think as proper trade agreements, which can take years to come about and years sometimes to implement. I mean, this is much looser, isn't it?
Indeed, they are effectively agreements in principle with a couple of headline commitments while both sides carry on negotiating on the range of issues that matter to both sides. In the UK, for example's case, that would be we actually would like to get our sort of tariff down below the 10% baseline that applies across many of the rest of our products, apart from some of the sectoral tariffs. For example, on steel, we have a commitment to try and get that down from 25%. The consensus was that was due to expire this week. We're not quite sure how that factors into these kind of reciprocal tariffs. It's a little bit different. So perhaps we won't jump up to the 50%. We will get a little bit more time to negotiate. But, you know, really, I think that we're in for many more months, not just weeks of negotiations.
And this is a reminder, isn't it, I think, as you say, we are here again. And if you look at the market reaction to all this, there is, again, that sense about Donald Trump to take him seriously, but not literally, that he is someone who is clearly prepared to move, to delay, to try and get a deal.
I think that we've seen that Donald Trump's instincts to want to be seen and presented as a deal maker, a tough one, but a deal maker, are kind of shining through. That, you know, if the case is, as these countries are saying, they need more time to make some of the concessions and get the compromises that he wants to see, he's willing to do that. I don't think that the market should entirely doubt Trump's resolve in this. We've seen in the past that they didn't think he was going to do the big tariffs on, China, the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. That happened. They didn't think they were going to do the tariffs on Liberation Day, on the 10% baseline. That happened. So I'm a little bit cautious about kind of testing Trump's resolve too much, because the more he feels slighted, you know, he is very liable to make decisions on a whim.
But doesn't he, in a sense, also feel slightly emboldened? He's got his big, beautiful bill through. Actually, the figures in the US around inflation and unemployment don't seem quite as bad. I mean, he was buffeted by the markets, wasn't he, earlier on? He may feel that he can go a little further this time around.
Indeed. I mean, if you look at the job numbers that came out recently in the US, they're not as bad as people expected. Now, there is an argument to say that actually, in terms of the numbers reflecting some of the impact on the economy from these tariffs, but we haven't seen the full sweep of the tariffs yet. So this staggered approach seems to be being shrugged off by the markets. It's not really having a massive impact on US growth. There was a question about whether it could be a lot higher without all this uncertainty. And I think that effectively Trump is happy to carry on sort of trudging along with this sort of half-hearted approach to negotiations. He will say, well, listen, we've got more tariff revenue coming in. What he really wants to see is that he is making deals and that he is being able to land investment deals from companies who are making this investment decisions to try and move more of their production back into the U.S.
And just finally, very finally, Ali, where are we with this here in the UK? I mean, we did, as you say, sign that framework. It was much lauded at the time a couple of months ago. But as I was talking about in the headlines there still are concerns around steel and aluminium and where we are and the impact the tariffs will have on that industry back here at home.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting to see that in that framework deal, obviously, there's a commitment to cut the tariffs on exports of our autos, of our sort of parts of our aviation aircraft to the United States. Steel was also in there, but that didn't actually come into effect, unlike some of the other commitments to reduce tariffs on us. And so there's a big question now about, the United States will say, well, we want to make sure that the steel that's going into the products that you want your tariff reductions on is actually being melted and poured in the United Kingdom. There's not a lot of that. So at the moment, it's a wait and see game to see when that comes into effect and if we can satisfy the US conditions.
Yeah, we have unsurprisingly not talked about Donald Trump and his tariffs for the last time. In fact, I think it's going to be quite a lot of this summer. Ali, always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed from SEC Newgate. Thank you. Now, banks, building societies and asset managers have warned the Chancellor over proposed changes to the cash ISA regime. The Chancellor is reported to be considering a £4,000 limit on how much people can put into the cash ISAs on a tax-free basis per year. That would be down from the current £20,000 a year ceiling. Well, unsurprisingly, one such critic is from the Yorkshire Building Society. They've written to the Chancellor to caution against the idea. Tom Ranger is Yorkshire Building Society's Chief Financial Officer. And as you can see, joins me now. Tom, very good morning to you. What are your concerns?
Look, I think cash ISAs have been the cornerstone of the UK savings market, helping millions of people build financial resilience, and especially those on low incomes. I think 47% of cash ISA balances are held by people who earn less than £20,000. And our research here at Yorkshire Building Society has shown that over 60% of our members actually are unlikely to move from cash into stocks and shares. And that also links with some interesting research from the Building Society Association that said that 73% of UK adults are against the UK government reducing or scrapping the cash allowance. And it's vital for the wider economy. So if I think about building societies, 40% of our funding comes from cash ISAs, and that funding is deployed into the UK mortgage market, and for the building society sector, particularly for first-time buyers, where we punch considerably above our weight.
In saying that, Tom, I mean, the government's point of view is pretty clear on this. They say the stock market has outperformed cash over the last couple of decades, and also they want to boost the domestic stock market. This is a way of doing it, and obviously you guys have got a self-interest, but you've been overly cautious here, that kind of we need to become more like the Americans, if you like.
Yeah, look, I think, we're not against stocks and shares ISAs. In fact, people have the option today. I think what we are saying is that people should have that choice. And alongside that choice, we think there should be a program of education around the different risks associated. Latest polls have shown that 90% of savers actually want to guarantee their capital back, which is something you wouldn't necessarily be guaranteed if you moved into stocks and shares ISAs. So absolutely not against it as a product. We just think there should be choice. And with that choice should be cash ISAs that we also think play a vital role for the UK economy through mortgage lending.
Yeah, in saying that, we're trying to find economic growth here. The government thinks this is a good idea. And you talked about education there. It isn't one part of the problem in the UK is that we are too focused on cash. We're too risk averse. We're not, in a sense, entrepreneurial in some ways. And I mean that as being just a retail investors. And more dynamic, successful economies actually are less likely to focus on kind of cash reserves and more likely to maybe take a bit of a risk. That's what sometimes you may well need to do.
Yeah, and certainly you can see that kind of argument from the government. I think we're absolutely not saying that that stocks and shares ISAs, shouldn't be available for consumers. We just think they should have that choice, and therefore scrapping or cutting the cash ISA allowance is going to negate that choice for savers in the UK. And it should be noted that I think over 35% of cash ISA balances today are with people aged over 55. And I question how much volatility they would want in their savings balances going forward. So I think choice is important. I think cash ISAs are important. I think stocks and shares ISAs are important. But we shouldn't underestimate the impact that reducing that limit or removing that limit would have on the UK economy through the housing market.
OK, I'm sure you're probably hoping for another Chancellor U-turn on all of this. Tom, we really appreciate your time this morning, live from Leeds, from the Yorkshire Building Society. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
OK, let's return to a bit more on those US tariffs. The UK set to miss that White House imposed deadline on a trade deal around steel and aluminium this week. Let's bring in Ed Conway. Ed, very good morning to you. Just bring us up to date with where we are. It's quite confusing, frankly, to keep up with these kind of different levels of tariffs on different goods and very different deadlines.
It's massively confusing, Darren. To be honest with you, all trade economics is pretty confusing. So, when we go into this world of tariffs and, rules of origin and all that, don't worry. But the main story here is I think there's quite a lot of disappointment around the steel sector. So basically, you've got this deal or supposed deal that the government came up with basically 2 months ago with the US, and it was essentially going to be zero tariffs for a lot of steel exports into the US. At the moment, that other people have to pay 50%, the UK has to pay 25%, and then you've got other deals on cars, on automotives, and on aerospace as well. And the idea was always it was going to be announced, and then there was going to be a process of negotiation, and all of the small print was going to be done between the UK and the US teams, and that's been going on. There has been small print now on cars, so that's actually kicked into operation, and aerospace. But steel has always been the tricky one. That's partly because it comes down to the question of whether something is melted and poured in the UK. Basically, there is a lot of steel that's made in the UK. Some of it is made in blast furnaces, some of it is made in electric arc furnaces, and some of it is actually imported from overseas and then processed in the UK. And that's the case for a lot of stuff that's exported to the US. So Tata Steel, they used to have blast furnaces, which means it was melted and poured. But now those blast furnaces have been shut down, and as a result of that, they're having to import a lot of stuff in from the Netherlands. It comes across the sea, actually from India as well, comes across the sea, comes into Port Talbot and other places, and then gets processed, kind of turned into the tin plate that then is usually turned into cans, and that's stuff that goes into US supermarkets. Now, right now, that stuff is not melted and poured in the UK, and so a lot of people in the US side are saying, listen, we're not quite sure about this, all of which is why it's taking much longer than expected. So long story short, it's mildly complicated, but long story short, the deal hasn't been done today, and a lot of people in the UK, they don't expect it to be done until maybe the end of the month, but they still think that the UK is not going to have to face those 50% tariffs other people will. So it's 25% for the time being, but that's worse than a lot of people had hoped for by now.
OK, Ed, thank you very much indeed for that. As always, Ed Conway there, live for us in central London. OK, let's bring you up to date with some of the rest of the day's stories now. And Tesla shares were down yesterday after Elon Musk launched a new political party. Investors in Tesla, who were hoping that Musk would focus more on manufacturing cars after leaving the White House, were disappointed after he announced the America Party on Saturday. Shein has reportedly filed for an initial public offering in Hong Kong as the online fashion retailer attempts to pressure the UK regulator into approving a London listing. The Singapore-based company filed for a London initial public offering around 18 months ago, but has been unable to secure regulatory approval. And the chairman of Marks and Spencer has described events surrounding the major cyber attack that left the retailer unable to take any online orders for more than 6 weeks. Archie Norman's been talking to MPs this morning on the Business and Trade Subcommittee that he had not experienced anything quite like this before in his extensive experience in the corporate world.
It's like an out-of-body experience, and I think it's fair to say that everybody at M&S experienced it, like in the shops, our ordinary shop colleagues, working in ways they hadn't worked for 30 years, working extra hours just to try and keep the show on the road. I mean, let aside our tech colleagues, for a week probably the cyber team had no sleep, or 3 hours a night. So it was, it's not an overstatement to describe it as traumatic.
And you get more on Archie Norman, the chairman of M&S's evidence to the House of Commons on our Money Blog, and also how John Lewis has overtaken M&S to become the UK's top-rated retailer for customer satisfaction on our Money Blog. All you need to do is scan the QR code that's on your screen right now. Now, Britain is set to experience yet another heat wave starting tomorrow, just in time for the final stretch, of course, of Wimbledon. Economists often talk about how the weather affects retail and hospitality, but how much difference does the actual sunny weather make to the corporate balance sheet? Well, delighted to say we can speak to Dean Copley. He is hotel director for the South Place Hotel, and as you can see, is in a very sunny bar in the city of London. Dean, very good morning to you. What's your experience? You've been in this industry for a long time. I mean, it does seem to make sense that when the weather's good, people want to go out and have a good time.
Well, Darren, I'd just like to thank the British public, because last month we had record numbers because of the too many heat waves we had, and we're looking forward to the one coming up this weekend. So thank you, all of you out there.
Well, thank you indeed. Well, what impact does it have, though, in terms of, hospitality's been under a lot of pressure recently. I mean, I assume it is more people drinking and eating, particularly when they can do outside.
Well, I'm not as clever as some of the analysts that you've had on, and I can't talk about tariffs. However, I can tell you that month on month, July was 10% above what it was in 24. And that's just down to weather. And obviously looking forward to the weather coming up. Obviously, a Wimbledon week is always great. Showing Wimbledon downstairs in some of our venues, doing a couple of promotions, just having fun with it.
Yeah, and when you say having fun, I mean, this, as I say, is been quite a difficult time. We've talked in the past about the fact that there's been tax increases. We know, the cost of living impact still impacts some people. And even at the higher end of the market, it's not been all plain sailing. So I suspect you welcome these moments clearly when they come about.
Well, absolutely, we welcome them. And once again, like I say, we just take advantage when we can take advantage of it. And we become weather forecasters, where we look at the weather so intently so that we can almost forecast how many staff we're going to have on a day. Because as soon as the sun comes out, the British public come out.
Yeah, they do indeed. And also, we've talked a lot, haven't we, during COVID about al fresco dining. What's been notable in cities like London and Manchester, Glasgow and elsewhere is almost this Americanization of kind of the rooftop bar that we're becoming a lot more au fait in this country, almost keen, I might suggest, to be on a rooftop.
Well, I just think it's like I say, here in the city, we've pushed. I mean, my favorite is Madison with the best view of St. Paul's. If you want a little bit of wind shelter, you go to Coq de Jean. But there's a rooftop for everyone in London.
There is indeed. But in saying that, as I say, these places can be expensive. And they can be, for the ordinary punter, if you like. How do you work with that? How do you essentially try and get that balance right between a premium product and something that is accessible for everyone?
Well, look, I'm sitting in a Michelin star restaurant at the moment called Angler. But, if you go over to somewhere like 14 Hills, they have a very accessible drinks menu, which caters for everyone and still gives you the view. OK,
Dean, well, good luck. It looks like you're enjoying it, and indeed some of your customers behind you too, live there from the South Place Hotel in central London. Thank you very much indeed.
Have a good day.
Cheers, Dean. Lucky him. OK, that's it from me for the moment. Of course, coming up next on Sky News, we're going to have continuing coverage from the Post Office inquiry, expecting them to issue their reports. It's going to focus on compensation and the human impact of the scandal has had on people. We know that, of course, over the last 15 years, 900 sub-postmasters were prosecuted for falsely accounting, theft and fraud in what is thought to be one of the biggest miscarriages of justice in the UK. In around 5 minutes' time, we're going to get that first key report from the Post Office inquiry. We will bring you the findings right here on Sky News. Matt Bobette is live at the Oval with continuing analysis from midday. Do stay tuned for that. We're back on Business Live at 4:30 this afternoon, in between continuing coverage also of that state visit by Emmanuel Macron, who's just arrived at RAF Norfolk, making his way to Windsor Castle to meet the King. It's a busy news day. We'll see you a little later.